Good morning. Happy Friday. Testing. Good morning. Happy Friday. Testing. All right. So just wanted to make sure everything's adjusted here, right? Okay. Cool. Yeah. Good morning. It's okay. Well, there we go. Feels like it's a little crooked at 10, but that's okay. I do apologize. There we go. Yeah, good morning, everybody. It is a little after 7. It is about 7:08 a.m. on this TGIF. Thank God it's Friday, August 14th, 2020. Yes, I was planning to do this a little bit earlier, except, when you set your alarm and it goes off and you wake up and get yourself ready, you want to let your body wake up as well as get yourself some energy to supply you with as you get ready to do this. And right now, in case you guys are wondering, yes, we are in a heat wave. It's already 75 degrees outside, so it's kind of one of those situations. But anyway, again, welcome and good morning. So we have 6 topics to try to quickly get through this morning. 6 of them, anyway. And what are those topics you might be wondering about? Well, those topics are, and we're going to get right to them. The first topic, we'll talk about Joe Biden choosing Kamala Harris as his running mate for vice president, and why it's already being soured on even by his own supporters. Second thing we'll talk about, WWE has finally gotten a location, as far as we know, for SummerSlam that's outside of the Performance Center. And possibly it's going to be the future location for future Raws and SmackDowns and all that. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about, speaking of wrestling, the passing of someone I grew up on back in the 80s, 90s, and that is Big Jim Harris, otherwise known as the wrestling legend Kamala, the Ugandan giant or Ugandan headhunter or warrior, depending on how he was introduced. Number 4, we'll also talk about, on the fourth topic, we'll talk about new characters to be introduced in the Animaniacs Reboot, premiering the week, forgot to put week, but the week before Thanksgiving. Yes, in case you guys don't know, they are scheduled to debut on November 20th, unless things change, on Hulu. Number 5, we'll talk about the season 10 comic. That's right, the season 10 comic and continuation of My Little Pony: Friendship is Magic, and the fact that it's now out, along with the crossover with Transformers known as Friendship in Disguise. As you can see in the back, I have the covers up as posters. And then we're going to talk about, finally, the last topic. We'll talk about the last topic is debatable romances in animated series that have happened in the past 30 to 40, I forgot to put years, past 30 to 40 years, that are hinted at, up for the interpretation or up for interpretation, etc. And I'll kind of explain what I mean by that as we go along. So yeah. Anyway, let's talk about our first topic, and that is, as I mentioned, as I linked this up on Twitter, that is Joe Biden, as of the past 24 to 48 hours, came out and announced his running mate for vice president. Of course, Joe Biden, the Democratic candidate for president this year, he's finally come out. Everybody was wondering who he was going to choose. There was a whole list of candidates, mostly female, with all due respect, that were shown. And the person he chose was Kamala Harris. He chose her Of course, she was born here in the Bay Area in Oakland, well, here in California. She's mostly known for being a representative of California, whether it's a senator, as she is now, as someone that was on the state senate, was someone that was on the city council, something like that for San Francisco. But yeah, he chose her, Kamala Harris, as his running mate. And here's the thing about his decision to choose her. Even though there are people that do support the idea, and I have read that there are people that support the idea, there are others, if not, and I'm not saying this as an exaggeration, I'm saying this as a fact. It seems that there are others, if not a majority of others, just slightly, that are opposite of his choosing of Kamala Harris. And the reason I say that is because if you were living under a rock, which I don't think none of us were, Kamala Harris was recently a presidential candidate. She was running for president herself. And not only was she running for president herself, but I think she was running on the Democratic side or the liberal side or something like that. And basically, when she realized she wasn't going to succeed, she dropped out and showed support for Biden. And it's not just the fact that she was running for president in this very election, which she dropped out of, that is under scrutiny for her being chosen as a running mate, but it's also her stance on a lot of topics that are very controversial and debatable. Like, for example, one of the big things that Fox News, whether you follow them or you don't, or believe them or you don't, reported, and I'm sure CBS has done the same thing, and ABC and NBC, like I said, whether you believe them or you don't, has reported, is that a lot of pro-life supporters of Biden have now gone against him. They've basically said, we're not going to support you this year. We're not going to vote. We're either going to choose a different side and choose either Trump or somebody else, but we're not going to choose you. Or according to some reports, they're just going to not vote. They're just going to sit it out. All because he chose this lady as his running vice president. And there are many other reasons, too, that those that, like I said, just by a slight majority are against this over those that are for it. Those that, like I said, just by a slight majority that are opposed to it, there are other reasons they feel, Biden made a wrong choice. One of the biggest reasons, one of the biggest speculations, I should say, is the fact that they feel that the Democrats, mostly someone like Pelosi, suggested Kamala Harris so that she could be an easier way to manipulate Biden into doing what they want. And if, let's say, Biden gets elected and down the line he is deemed unsuitable to lead, Kamala Harris would eventually be the one to step in and become president. Let's say if he ends up in the same situation as Trump and that's being possibly impeached or voted incompetent of being the leader. That's the speculation people have. That's one of the other speculations that people have as to why they oppose this decision. Now, again, I'm not saying everybody is against it. There are those that like the idea because some people do look at Kamala Harris as a strong woman that's gone through a lot in her 50 plus years of existence. Like I said, she was born here in California, lived in the Bay Area, family moved to Canada, stuff like that. I mean, she's got a whole bio on her personal life and what she has done in success throughout the late 80s, throughout the late 80s, throughout the 90s, and all that. So there are people that do like the idea that that Biden chose her because, like I said, some look at her as a strong-willed woman that won't take crap from someone like Trump or Pence. But then again, like I said, you have people, you have that other side that's just a slight more in number wise that are against this idea. I mean, like I said, you have Biden supporters. That's what it even says in the description. When I said Biden chooses Harris as his running mate for the election, and why it's already being soured on even by his own supporters. Like I said, you have his own supporters, pro-life or not pro-life or whatever, that don't like the idea. They don't like the idea that he chose this woman to be his running mate because of what she believes in, her stance on a lot of things, not just, hey, you should choose whether or not you want to have a child and all that, or whatever topic she's, supportive of. Nobody likes the fact that he chose her. And even the media, believe it or not, even the media feels that what this is going to do is it's going to hurt him more than it's going to help him. Now, like I said, I understand. Now, as I said, there are people that feel opposite of that. Some people feel like, no, it's, they're just blowing it out of proportion. It's going to help him. It's going to support him. It's going to make him win the election because he chose her and it'll be history. That's what people want. And that's probably another reason why he chose her. Again, nothing against a female president, nothing against a female vice president. I'm totally for that. But that's another reason why some people feel that Biden chose why Biden chose her. Because of the fact that she's a woman, and the fact that no, and because of the fact that basically Biden, if not the Democrats who probably suggested he choose her, probably feel that that's going to be in his favor because if there's one thing a lot of people like to do, it's make history. They like to make history. I mean, the one thing that everybody still hangs the coattails on, and I say this with all due respect, the one thing a lot of people hang their coattails on still is electing Barack Obama as the first African-American president ever. And that's a great thing. That's great. You want to hang your coattails on it, that's great. I support the idea of wanting to make history. And despite how people may feel about Barack, and yeah, he's made some decisions people agree and don't agree with, he did have a lot of exuberant energy that, despite him not doing the best job any president could in people's eyes, kind of made you like him, kind of made you kind of be like, yeah, you realize, hey, he's a good guy. He's got a good heart. He's just making the wrong decisions. He's listening to the wrong people. So again, I'm all for that, for making history. And that's why Biden made the announcement he did, not because of the fact that, hey, she's got this impressive resume that makes her the perfect candidate or perfect running mate for vice president, but it's also the fact that he, and mostly the Democrats that probably suggested he choose her, realized that if there's one thing that could be at his advantage, it's it's people like making history. And if they can get a woman vice president in there, that's making history. But again, going back to what I said, despite the fact that there are a lot of people that are for this and they're okay with it because they feel Kamala Harris is probably the best choice right now. best choice out there to be a possible vice president, there's just slightly more people, mostly on the Democratic side and the Biden supporting side, that don't like the idea that he chose her. And they feel it's just going to blow up in his face. Like I said, there are many people that, that feel, that speculate, that feel and speculate that the only reason she was chosen was, like I said, the Democrats maybe suggested it, and the fact that, let's say what people are speculating about Biden being, speculate about Biden being, comes to pass, which, he has a dementia or bits of it, this would be the perfect way for them, let's say a Pelosi, to get what she's been wanting. Because a lot of people always speculate because the one thing a lot of people have debated about Pelosi is, what is her problem? Why does she not like Trump? What is her problem? Why was she so adamant about getting him out as soon as he got in? Is it because of the way he mistreated women, or showed respect towards them, or whatever, or looked down upon them? Maybe. But I think the other reason, and one senator during the impeachment trial earlier this year into late last year, one thing that one senator said was, look, if Trump was to get impeached, it doesn't mean Hillary Clinton comes in. Basically, this senator called out the Democrats, mostly I think Pelosi, on the fact that they believed that, hey, we get rid of Trump, we'll get Clinton. So a lot of people, like I said, have that. A lot of people, even those that support Biden and want to see him win, feel that he made the wrong choice here, because all this is just a power play by, let's say, someone like Pelosi to finally get what she's wanting, to possibly get what she's been wanting. And you know what? I can honestly see people going like, well, if she wants a woman president in there, why didn't she just run for it? And I think the reason she doesn't run is because she realizes she'll lose. She won't even make it past preliminaries. But getting back on topic, like I said, there's just a slight majority of people that are against, just a slight smidge more of people, that are against the choice that Biden made. They're against it. It's like, hey, to them, it's like, look, you want to choose her, that's fine, more power to you. We just don't agree with it, and because we don't agree with it and we feel it's the wrong decision to make, we're not going to vote for you. We're either going to vote for Trump or somebody else, or we're just going to sit it out. Because they could pretty much see already what possibly will happen, or what the end result would be. Now, again, like I said, if I'm not against a woman becoming vice president or president, if that happens, as my mom always says, God has a reason for it happening. And like I said, if it happens, great, no problem, cool. But the thing is, if you were to look at all the other possible candidates besides Kamala Harris, as being possible candidates to work with, if you will, or to have as a running mate, a lot of people probably would have chose one of them over her, because despite how they might feel about certain things, they maybe, in the eyes of those that don't like this idea, those are better options and choices. Now, I don't know how how basically the politicalness when it comes to elections goes, and I don't know whether or not maybe he could just decide, okay, look, this is getting too much backlash on me, and maybe I need to choose somebody else, and maybe make the announcement that she's not his running mate anymore. He's going to choose somebody else. I don't know if he can do that, but all I can say is, people, like I said, people are not happy. They are not legitimately happy about this choice. And as crazy as it sounds, a majority of those people outnumber just slightly those that like the idea. They do, and it's all because of some of the things she's supportive of, and and these are things they don't agree with. These are topics and things that they don't agree with. So, yeah, it's honestly, folks, the way it sounds, in my opinion, just my opinion, the way it sounds, Biden basically probably just shot himself in the foot by choosing Kamala Harris. Because, again, there's a lot of folks, not just average citizens like us, but there's a lot of people, even in the media, Fox News, CBS News, NBC News, CNN, ABC, despite whether you agree with what they say or they don't, whether you agree or disagree that they exaggerate things or they don't, from what I understand, a lot of them have been in agreement or have said similar takes on the similar opinions on the fact that Biden probably just ruined his chances of becoming president by choosing her. Again, it just shows you that, this, to me, in my opinion, this just shows you who's really running the show when it comes to Biden's run at being president. And that's the Democrats and other parties involved. All because they're desperate to get, Trump out of office and those involved with Trump out of office. But yeah, it doesn't look like it doesn't paint a very good picture for him. And right now, whatever support he had is probably going to go downhill. Now, unless they come up with a strategy to where Harris comes out and says, "Hey, look, I was originally about this, but I realize now that that's not the right direction to go, the right path to go in. So I'm not going to support that. And instead, I'm going to do the right thing and support it the other way." If they start doing that, fine, more power to them. But I'm going to tell you, it's going to be as the old saying goes with things like this, it's going to be an uphill climb. It really is. It's going to be an uphill climb for them because, they want that presidency. There's no doubt. They want that presidency. You know, they want that presidency, but it's going to be hard for them to try to get it now because of the fact of who he's chosen. You know, but as I always, but as I and a lot of people always say when a situation like this comes up, it's a wait and see kind of deal. That's what it is. It's wait and see. It's not much we can really do right now. And as my mom always says, God is in control, and if God has a reason as to why she was elected, as to why he chose her, then so be it. That's his choice. But yeah, it's like I said, it's already being soured on by a lot of people, including his own supporters. So, Biden is gonna, if people thought Biden possibly had a hard shot at becoming president before, they thought that before, I think it's going to get slightly harder now because of the fact that he has her as his running mate. And like I said, nobody Nobody likes that. Nobody likes the fact that she's the running mate. That he chose. So yeah, it's going to be fun to see exactly what happens. It's going to be really fun to see exactly what happens with this choice that he's made, because honestly, folks, maybe it'll work, maybe it won't, but I don't know. Maybe it'll work. Maybe it'll work. Maybe it won't. I don't know. It's just one of those situations where I think, you want. Here's the thing, and I say this with all due respect. It's one of those situations to where it's like, hey, you want you want Trump out of office. You're willing to support somebody that technically, mentally may not be suitable to run as president. So now you have to deal with the choices he makes, especially when it comes to who he chooses as his running mate for vice president. So yeah, so now you got to deal with that. And if it succeeds, it succeeds. If it doesn't, you got no one else but yourself to blame. But anyway, enough with that topic. We're going to move on to our second topic here on this TGIF Friday, August 14th. And that second topic is WWE finally found a location. Yes, WWE SummerSlam will take place at the Amway Center in Orlando, Florida, which is apparently just a few miles away from the Performance Center. Now, the reason this announcement was made recently in the past couple of days was, as I talked about in my last topics on my mind, the question was basically, what was WWE going to hold SummerSlam this year? Because Vince McMahon and a few other parties involved were very avid, if you will. Like I said, it was very, just checking some of that, but it was very evident about not having SummerSlam at the Performance Center like he's been having Raw and SmackDown and the other pay-per-views like WrestleMania and Backlash and Extreme Rules, stuff like that. He was and Money in the Bank as well, which they had to get creative with. But he was very adamant about not having the second biggest show, the third biggest show of the year, if not the biggest show of the summer for them, in the PC. And they tried everything in the book that they could try. They talked with the people in Atlantic City, New Jersey, to probably have it on the boardwalk, if not on the beach. Maybe at the Boardwalk Hall where they've held events before. They've talked about, trying to probably have it on a boat, on a cruise, like, AEW did with Dynamite earlier this year, or, at the beginning of this year. So they've talked about a lot of discussions, and they've even talked about having to hold it possibly in Orlando, but not at the Performance Center. Some have even said, why don't you just go outside of the Performance Center? I mean, literally outside on the parking lot, if you will, decorated, and there you go. And the Amway Center had also been coming up a lot as a possible location because it's still in Orlando. It's not that far from the Performance Center. And if anything comes up, I should say, they could just quickly pack everything up, go back to the Performance Center, and just refilm or retape the shows there. But yeah, the announcement has been made. I think tonight on SmackDown they'll make it official that the Amway Center in Orlando, Florida, will be the location. Now, hopefully, they do emphasize that, even though the Amway Center will be the location, there'll only be a select few people allowed in. That only a select few people will be allowed in to the arena. Now, the one question that Brian Alvarez and I think Mike Johnson had on the F4W Online podcast or clip that was shown on YouTube is, how is this going to look? Is it going to look bad? Is it going to look good? What is WWE going to do? And the one thing that went through my mind about this was WWE. They're going to take a page out of MLB. That's what they're going to do. They're going to take a page out of Major League Baseball. They're going to take a page out of the NBA maybe, or the WNBA. But they're going to take a page out of a lot of sporting events that are now relying on basically dubbing in crowd noise to make it feel lively, to make it feel like people are actually there. Like, they might even go as far as to say, hey, if they can do cardboard cutouts, so can we. And maybe that's what they'll do. I don't think they're going to fill the entire Amway Center with cardboards, but just basically like on the hard camera side and maybe behind people and all, maybe behind the announcers and stuff. That might be what they do, but I think one of the primary things they may do is they're going to dim the lights. They're going to dim the lights and everything when they do the matches so that the focus is on the ring, on the match, and they're going to pump in crowd noise. That's what they're going to do. They're going to basically, like I said, they're going to take a page out of Major League Baseball and some other sporting events, and they're going to say, let's do what they're doing. Let's pump in the crowd noise. Let's make it sound more lively and go from there. Because when you watch Major League Baseball, my friends, depending on where you live, and that was just my dog. She just woke up a little bit. She's fine. But like I said, when you watch Major League Baseball, my friends, now that it's restarted in its shortened season, what is the one thing you seem to notice, when it comes to the game? Well, one, you notice the cardboard cutouts of people in attendance, or supposedly in attendance, even if it's, cardboard cutouts of celebrities, former political figures, or even yourself, because there have been, Major League Baseball did make the announcement that if you take a selfie and send it in, that there's a possibility you could be shown on television as a cardboard cutout in the stands. Anyway, what is the one thing you've noticed besides that? The one thing you may have noticed is they've been pumping in crowd noise. Yeah. It hasn't just been throw the ball and ooh, strike, and that's all you hear. No, you're hearing noise. You're hearing crowd noise as if people are actually there. I mean, why do you think? Here's something I want people to think about, and maybe I'll clip this out and send it to Alex down the line, formerly Deluxe Man. Why do you think they pumped in crowd noise during Extreme Rules, I think, or during recent episodes of Raw and SmackDown? Because they were probably preparing for this. They were probably preparing for the fact that if they get something outside of the PC for SummerSlam, that they are going to basically take the route that all these major sports have gone. And that's basically pumping crowd noise so it makes it sound like somebody is actually there and it doesn't feel, devoid of life. I mean, yeah, you'll probably have the recruits and the trainees there and everything, but it won't sound so devoid of life. And I think that's the one thing people are probably speculating already. I'm sure just Alex, he's probably going to talk about this later on today. He's probably speculating the same thing, that the only way they're going to make this come off as good is they got to dim the lights, like I said, put the focus on the ring, as well as pumping that crowd noise to make it sound like, then that there are actual people there. And you know what? When you think about it, that might come off better than being at the Performance Center, because you could have the crowd noise echoing throughout the arena, and it'll feel like people are actually there. It'll feel like people are actually there. Like, you can dim the lights if you have, like, let's say you could have Seth Rollins before his match with Dominic Mysterio, right? You have Seth Rollins get on the mic in the front of the hard cam or whatever, make it sound like he's, have him do his promo and all that, but then pump in the booze and everything that you need to. Why do you think they're sending production trucks and everything out there right now, probably with some superstars, to kind of test out how things will look, how things will go? Now, there has been discussion as well that SmackDown is going to be there, possibly. I don't know if they're going to be there tonight or they're going to be there next week for the Go Home show. They might be there tonight as part of the storyline for safety precautions or something. I don't know. But anyway, we'll just see what it's going to look like, how it's going to look, how it's going to come off on television. And again, I think what they're going to probably do is just dim the lights. Now, you might say, well, what difference does that make when it comes to them not being out of the PC Center? Well, one, if you take a look at a lot of the classic stuff, a lot of the classic shows of the 80s and the 90s and even the 2000s, and if not recently, one of the things WWE has done is they put a focus on the ring when it comes to certain events. You take a look at Evolution, the women's pay-per-view a few years ago. They put a spotlight, they dimmed the lights, put a spotlight on the ring. Not because the arena didn't sell out, but because they wanted to put more emphasis on the people, on the ladies in the ring. Same with the Cruiserweight Classic. They put emphasis on the Cruiserweight Classic. They want to put emphasis on those involved. So my theory is that's what they're probably going to end up doing, is they're going to end up going the route of putting more emphasis on the ring by putting the light firmly on the ring, dimming most of the arena except for maybe where the recruits might be, and basically start pumping in that crowd noise to make it feel like there's a legitimate live crowd in attendance, even though most of the arena will be darkened out, so that way you can have the emphasis on the ring, but in your mind you can imagine, oh, there are people there. And if they're going to be there tonight for SmackDown, we'll hopefully get a good idea of how it's going to come off. But yeah, SummerSlam is going to be taking place at the Amway Center this year. Originally, it was supposed to be at the TD Water Garden in Boston, but because of what's going on, that's not going to happen. But I got a feeling SummerSlam will be at the TD Water Garden, a garden center next year to make up for what happened this year. And that seems to be the theme WWE is going to go with. They're going to go with, hey, because of what's going on this year, we're going to take the events that we promised these cities this year, and we're going to bring them to the city next year. So pretty much SummerSlam in Boston, it's already locked up for next year. SummerSlam, WrestleMania in Tampa Bay, that's locked up. Survivor Series, that's going to be the question. I think that's why the Amway Center is going to be a testing point, because if they can start slowly getting people in, they might be able to go to other venues. Because I don't think Orlando is going to want to keep renting out the Amway Center for WWE. They're going to probably want to get some other things in there as well once they get the clear. But yeah, SummerSlam is going to take place this year at the Amway Center in Orlando, Florida. So really looking forward to I'm actually looking forward to seeing how that comes off. And maybe we'll get an idea tonight on SmackDown. All right. Speaking of wrestling, that brings us into our third topic. and that is the passing of a legend. That's right. This past week, someone that I grew up on in wrestling passed away, and that was Big Jim Harris, otherwise known to a lot of us fans of the 80s and the 90s, and even the 2000s, 2010s, as Kamala. That's right. Big Jim Harris, otherwise known as Kamala to a lot of us growing up, passed away at the age of 70 this past week. Now, a lot of people are saying he passed away because of the virus. He got infected he went to an appointment, found out he was diagnosed with the virus, and passed away from it shortly afterwards. I guess a couple of days afterwards. I'm not really sure. But Kamala was already going through a lot. After he retired from the ring, a lot of his diabetes caught up to him, and he had both his legs on individual occasions, I think years apart, but he had both his legs amputated. He was living. He was living on his own with the support of his family in Mississippi, I think, or Louisiana. I can't really recall, but he was living in around that area, and he seemed to be doing all right. I mean, some people would look at where he was living and probably think, "Oh man, that's run down and all that." No, it was all right. It was fine. It was a nice place for him, in my opinion. Perfect place for him to live. I mean, he had electricity, he had water and everything. He was fine. A lot of times celebrities or athletes that retire from the spotlight, believe it or not, will buy up a small house like that, somewhere here in the States of the world, and just live there without anybody knowing that, hey, someone that used to be a big star lives in that area or lives in that home. And that's basically what Kamala did. But yeah, unfortunately, he passed away this week. And I can remember the first time I saw Kamala, well, at least I could try to remember the first time I saw him. And it wasn't the WWE. Well, it actually was the WWF. It was basically back in the late 80s, mid to late 80s. I wasn't watching wrestling as much. I wasn't watching WWF as much as I would later on. I mean, I knew about Hulk Hogan, and that's why I would occasionally watch it at times, and him being there. But I didn't watch it as much. I was a kid. Saturday morning, one thing I was always primarily into was cartoons, Saturday morning cartoons, stuff like that. And once the cartoons were done, I was out. I was back in my room or something. But I do remember on occasion seeing Kamala on WWF television, even as early as that time frame. And what's funny is I even remember watching him when the AWA would be on ESPN, and I think they even had World Class Championship Wrestling, which I guess at the time I also thought was AWA or something. It was weird. But I remember watching Kamala on those programs too. And the one thing that the one thing I never noticed about him until, of course, later on when you watch the WWE Network and you watch all this classic footage, is he was basically the same character everywhere he went, with one exception that depending on the territory where he went, even though he was the same character, there was always like a slight modification. Like in the WWF, he was exactly as you saw him and everything. He was exactly as you saw him. Yeah, in the early 80s when he showed up there, and then in the mid to late 80s, he was a little bit more violent. Not saying he wasn't. But when he showed up in the 90s, it's like they toned down that violence, but he was still intimidating. He was still an intimidating figure. But then the one thing I've noticed when you would watch some of the classic footage from other territories like World Class Championship Wrestling, Mid-South, AWA, the one thing I would notice is, not only would his face paint change and be totally different than what he would have on in the WWF, but he'd be a lot more violent. He'd be a lot more aggressive. And like I said, it was still the same character. Jim Harris was still playing the same character, but basically, when it came to World Class, AWA, and a few other Mid South and a few others, he was a little bit more violent. He was a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more intimidating, if not scary. And it was, it's just how do I put this? As a wrestling fan, which I still am, believe it or not, it's such a learning experience to see the different incarnations of the characters that you've grown to love. Like, like when Doink the Clown debuted, he was originally played by Matt Bourne. And then the identity got assumed by the likes of Steve Lombardi and Paul Diamond and a few others. But when you would see all these other incarnations of Doink around the country, not just WWF, but you would see in other independent promotions or wherever, you would either see a more friendly version than what you had in WWF, or you would get the complete opposite and you would get a sadistic version. I mean, recently, I don't know if it was Matt Bourne himself, I think it was, or somebody else had basically resurrected Doink on the independents and in an independent promotion and based this Doink off the Heath Ledger Joker from The Dark Knight. Basically being a more sadistic, violent Doink, if not more evil. So the character, what I'm trying to get at is, despite you as a fan being used to seeing the character as one way in one promotion, when you see them later on in other promotions, they can be the same character but completely different in several different ways. Like there can be minor, if not major, tweaks and modifications. And that was the one thing about Kamala. He was one of those characters that was a character that basically no matter where you saw him, he was still the same character, but it might be slightly different. He may have Kimchi with him as his handler, or he may have Friday, or Kimchi would be known as Friday, depending on where they were. Or he wouldn't have Kimchi or Friday. He would have just a manager. I mean, his debut match, believe it or not, is here on YouTube. You can find it. Kamala's first match, Kamala's debut match, is right here on YouTube. And, he doesn't have Kimchi just yet, or Friday just yet, unless that's who it is. Well, that's an early version, if you will. But what I'm getting at is you have a character, you have an individual like Jim Harris that was able to adapt his Kamala persona depending on where he went. Like he basically knew, hey, I have to be the same character as I always am, but I need to either tone it down or I need to notch it up or I need to turn it up. So yeah, Jim Harris as Kamala was such a great character. I love the idea that, and I know Jim may have not been too fond of it, but from what, or not just Jim, but other people may have not been too fond of it. But, I think Jim was cool with it, was a little cool with it, maybe not too much. But when you would have him going up against The Undertaker or Supernatural Force, it's like, well, how do you expect Jim, I'm pretty sure it's like, how do you expect Jim to react? How do you expect a character like Kamala to act towards someone like The Undertaker? And if you're positioning him from being from this place, from deep South Africa, then, deepest, darkest Africa, if you will, and I say that with all due respect, I mean, you have to expect possibly possibly that in the mindset of someone like, let's say, a Vince McMahon, Kamala is going to be frightened, and is going to be frightened of something like that. It's going to be unknown to him. Even though we have seen characterizations of characters like Kamala, like Jim Harris's character, to where they won't be afraid of it. They'll just go right at it. They'll just charge right at it. So I kind of, so basically, like I said, when I think of Kamala, when I think of Jim Harris as Kamala, it brings back a lot of fond memories. It really does. I mean, I was watching WWF when he feuded with The Undertaker. I was watching WWF when they hinted he was coming back. And it's like, as soon as they said Kamala, and I do remember this, because the moment they said Kamala was arriving, I was like, Kamala, I know that character. I've seen that guy before. And like I said, like I said earlier, it's because I saw him in other promotions. I saw him in AWA. I saw him in World Class Championship Wrestling. I saw him in Mid-South when they were all being shown on ESPN. And I think, like I said, I even saw him in my early days of WWF. So I knew who he was. And I think I'd even seen him made an appearance for NWA WCW when it was still in the NWA banner, but it was a brief appearance. And this is before he went back and became part of the Dungeon of Doom. But yeah, overall, though, the memories I have of Kamala are just fun memories. I love the fact that they had him do what I guess at the time was the honors, because when they brought in Umaga, which was not Rosie, but was originally one half of 3 Minute Warning. But when they brought in Umaga, a lot of people started making the comparisons to Kamala. I mean, you look at the Minitron doing his entrance, and one of the things that flashes on there is like a face, it's a face guard or a face helmet or whatever, very similar to Kamala's. So a lot of people made that comparison. And I think WWF at that time realized, we need to probably have the torch be passed here, because people are still going to be making that comparison if we don't. And in 2000, I think it was 2005, 2006, they allowed that to happen. Yeah, it was a bit of a squash, but at least you were finally able to see the past take on the present. So that was really cool. It was really cool. And that was really cool to see, despite, it being him jobbing out and what was potentially maybe one of his last matches for the company. I mean, he did make appearances here and there, but that was about it. I think the last time he wrestled was, I think, years before his first amputation, and that was against Eddie Kingston. You can find that here on YouTube as well. But yeah, it's just, and he was able to speak English. He was always able to speak English, is what I'm saying. No disrespect in that. Mispronouncing of words, mismincing of words. But what I said is, he just spoke like Jim Harris, like a normal guy. So yeah, so yeah, like I said, just have a lot of great fond memories of Kamala, and may he rest in peace. God rest his soul. But yeah, just a lot of great memories, and that's really all I can say about the guy. My prayers and condolences go out to his family, and I think the Hall of Fame, WWE Hall of Fame has to resume probably by the end of this year. Survivor Series, I would assume, is probably going to be the closest we're going to get, if we can get a crowd in there. And if we do, hopefully they'll add one more introduction into the Hall of Fame, and that will be Kamala. So, anyway, with that said, let's move on to our. So yeah, rest in peace, Kamala. God speed to you. Nothing. Nothing. Wrong number. Wrong number. Sorry about that. But anyway, basically a wrong number. I don't know why they're calling. But anyway, getting on to our fourth topic. And the fourth topic we're going to talk about here is something that the Animaniacs cast, recently talked about on social media. I think they talked about on the podcast. And that is new characters to be introduced in the Animaniacs Reboot, premiering the week before Thanksgiving. That's right. The scheduled date for the debut of Animaniacs, the reboot, is the week before Thanksgiving, as far as I know. Check. Yeah, it's basically the Friday before Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving, of course, following on the 26th this year. Anyway, getting back on topic, if you will. Like I said, the fourth topic, new characters to be introduced in the Animaniacs Reboot, premiering the week before Thanksgiving. Now, the Animaniacs cast announced that several characters originally, and I talked about this among others, some characters were not going to be returning, like Hello Nurse, Minerva Mink, and several others. Some names, besides, let's say, Pinky and the Brain, of characters from the original series have been rumored to return. Like Rita and Runt's being rumored. I think Slappy Squirrel and Skippy are being rumored. So there are several characters that are being rumored to return this year, or return in the new series when it debuts. But along with them possibly returning, along with Pinky and the Brain and the Warner siblings, we have new characters as well. Now, they didn't give out specific details of who these characters were, but I would have to assume that you gotta have characters that, and I said this before, you gotta have characters that are, yeah, tell me about it. But like I said, you gotta have characters that, as I talked about in the quick video I did on Minerva Mink, now being included, you got to have characters that are representations or similar to the characters that are not going to be there. So that even though they're going to be new and original, there might be some familiarity to them. And if I'm Warner Brothers, and I'm Hulu, and I'm Steven Spielberg, and I'm all of them involved, I got to make sure that whatever characters I'm introducing, they got to fit the mold of Animaniacs. They got to have some kind of familiarity of the characters that are not going to be there, as well as have some new originality to them. For example, I talked about a character being introduced that could be similar, toned down, but similar to Minerva Mink. And I think that's possible. I think it really is possible that that can happen. But when it comes to characters fitting into the mold of Animaniacs, you got to give them some kind of quirkiness, some kind of wackiness, right? To go along with the subtle normal, like, oh, I'm cool and everything, and like normal cool demeanor, like, I'm cool, nothing bugs me, and then all of a sudden something happens, or they see someone and they go from that cool demeanor, oh, nothing bugs me, to like ooga ooga kind of deal, like, whoa, mind blown. Hair turns into a lighter or something like that, or a match that gets lit, or a fuse that gets lit and stuff. So you got to have stuff like that to to go along with these new characters, and I'm hoping, and I'm sure they will. One thing you definitely going to have with one of them, especially if it's a new female character, one that could be, like I say, the toned down version of a Minerva Mink or similar, is you got to have that character doing the melting gag. You got to have them do the lustful melt. You can't just have them have their eyes bulge out and everything, and have them do flippity flips and all that, or having the jaws drop or the tongues come out or whatever, or just turn to ash or whatever. You got to have them have that lustful melt gag. You got to have them have the gag where they see an attractive character and they literally, one of the gags they do throughout in the cartoon short is to melt into a puddle of goop. And either they reform themselves, they get stepped in, they seep into the ground, and then get kind of return or reform by growing up into a flower that they pop out of the petal that opens up, stuff like that. Or you have the character they melt in front of, pick them up and reform them in some ways. You got to have that gag in there, and hopefully they will have that gag with one female and maybe one male character. Hopefully they will, and have it utilized, and have the gag basically utilized on multiple occasions. You have to have that gag. So yeah, to me, any new characters that they introduce, they got to have these characters be similar. Well, they got to be original, no doubt, but they got to have some kind of familiar, similar traits to the characters that will not be involved. And they might do that too. They might add in some characters from the original Looney Tunes, like this Bosco and Honey. They got introduced in the episode Fields of Honey of Tiny Toons, but we haven't seen them since. So why not add them to the cast? Or why not add the characters that were obviously the inspirations for the Warner siblings from the episode Foxtrot on Tiny Toons? Well, not Foxtrot, but on Two Tone Town, or whatever it's called. Add those characters. Because, they were the obvious inspirations for the Warner siblings, but add them. That could work as well. But like I said, if you're going to add new characters, they got to have original personality with a few familiar, similar quirks to whatever characters that they might be replacing. Like I said, if you have a toned down version of Minerva, you have a toned down version of Hello Nurse, you have a different set of birds that might be a different toned down, if not more wacky, version of the Good Feathers. If you have a new version or a new representation of Rita and Runt, if they're not in the series, which I think they're rumored to be, you need to make sure that they have not just their own original personalities and stuff, but like I said, and I know I'm repeating myself, so I do apologize, but you have to make sure they also have some familiar, similar traits of the characters that obviously fans are going to point at and say, hey, that character is just like so-and-so. Oh, I can see it a mile away. And hopefully they do that. And whatever new characters come in, like I said, they give us exactly what we're hoping out of them. Not just original personalities and original personalities, along with the zaniness and the wild takes and Tex Avery kind of stuff, but they also give us that familiar tone of the characters, like I said, that obviously they may be representing or replacing by having a similar, tone, a similar and familiar, wacky side to them, and gag, wacky side with them that has certain gags go along with them. And speaking of gags, like I said, you gotta have the lustful melt gag. You gotta have the gag where the women melt into a puddle of goop at the sight of an attractive man, and vice versa. Heck, if you're going to go the LGBTQ route in this as well, which they probably will, have a female melt at the sight of an attractive female and a male melt at the sight of an attractive male. If you want to go that route, I don't know if they will, but if you do it. You have to have that gag in there. And then, like I say, take it a step further. Have them either melt into a puddle where basically after they melt, they seep into the ground and then they pop up in a flower or out of a flower or something like that. Whatever. Have them do that. Have it. Have that gag occur. You want to get zany and wacky, there's a lot of tropes you can go with. You can go with the fusion trope. You can go with the shape-shifting trope. All that stuff with certain characters, and it would probably pay off very well. But like I said, whatever new characters they're bringing in, and like I said, the Animaniacs Cast podcast didn't say specifically who it was going to be, but whatever characters they bring in, hopefully they live up to what the Animaniacs legacy is about. And if certain characters are replacing, going to be stand-ins or replacements for characters that are not going to be there, hopefully you give them their own personality, but you also retain some of the wackiness of the characters that they're basically replacing and representing in their own unique way. Oh, well, I didn't know, my friend. But anyway, I didn't know. Well, my friend online was telling me he was talking about something else. But but I'm sure you get what I'm saying, guys, that they need to do that. They need to go that route. And hopefully they do. And whatever characters they introduce, like I said, hopefully live up to the Animaniacs legacy. But again, you got to have certain gags in there. You got to have the lustful melt gag. You got to have the traditionals, eyes popping out of the window gag, out of the eyes popping out of the head gag. You have the tongue going down onto the ground gag. You got to have the whole explode into pieces gag, or have the hair turn into a fuse kind of gag, whatever. You got to have those kind of gags, as well as have a shape-shifting trope as well. Like I said, have a shape-shifting trope or a fusion trope or whatever, and just go with that. And knowing the people behind this, if it's some of the original talent, like writers and all that, you can get very creative with it. You can get very creative, and I think anybody would agree that has potential. And all I can say is, can't wait. Just can't wait. What a week going into Thanksgiving. I mean, not only am I going to be off on Thanksgiving, which a lot of stores are going to be doing for their employees and associates, finally, after all this time, I was trying to think what I was going to say there, but also be able to watch the Animaniacs Reboot. And speaking of it, just before I go, the news that came out was, not only is it coming out, I think, the week before Thanksgiving on Hulu, but there's only going to be 13 episodes in the first season, which is going to be probably within that one day. It's one debut day, unless they decide to go individual. And then in 2021, which I think would be at the early portion of it, like January to March, between January and March, you'll get the second season, which will consist of another 13 episodes. And then we'll go from there. And if there's more seasons to come, it'll all be based on the success of those two seasons. So, yeah, Animaniacs, like I said, introducing new characters. Like I said, hopefully they have their own original personalities, but they also retain some of that zaniness and wackiness and gags that go along with it, like the lustful milk gag and all that I just mentioned along with new gags like the shape-shifting gag, a fusion gag, whatever. Hopefully they bring that incorporated all along with these characters. as well as the fact that the show will debut, like I said, a week before Thanksgiving, actually 6 days before, and it will have 13 episodes the first season, and then around the beginning of 2021, which would be around, let's say 2021, between January and March, I would assume that's when the second season with the 13 episodes will debut. Excuse me for a second. I don't know who that is. So 209 area code number, but I don't know who it is. But like I said, the second season, which would consist of 13 episodes, is set to debut, I would assume, in 2021, and I would assume between January and March, which is the early portion of the new year. Anyway, yeah, Animaniacs will be introducing new characters during, in the reboot when it premieres on the week before Thanksgiving. And hopefully they have everything that I just mentioned. I might even tweet the Animaniac cast to see if they know anything about that. And like I said, just can't wait to see the new series. All right, so the fifth topic we have. Fifth topic we're going to talk about here. Fifth topic is My Little Pony Friendship is Magic Season 10 comic is out, as well as the crossover with Transformers, which is called Friendship in Disguise, which of course I have poster versions of the covers on the back, and I hopefully will be getting the issue this week. But yeah, My Little Pony Friendship is Magic Season 10 comic, Episode 1. I think it's issue 89, I believe. I'm not really sure. As well as issue 1 of the crossover with Transformers Friendship in Disguise is out. And both so far have been getting positive reviews. And I haven't read the comic, but I do know somebody here on YouTube called MD Tanzim, MD Tanzim comic, MD Tanzim comic, has the first issue up as a video with background music and all that you can look at and take your time and read, as well as watch, if you will. And I think they'll be doing the same thing, if not already has done the same thing, with the first issue of Friendship in Disguise. And both have been well received. Both have, like I said, both have been well received. And, from what I can tell, the artwork is done by Andy Price. He's done the artwork before for the comic, when it comes to the season 10 comic, that is. But when I look at sorry about that again. But like I said, when I look at the artwork for the crossover, or I look at the artwork for the crossover with Transformers, basically I see artwork that's very similar to what you see in the show, because the artwork feels like it's taken, especially on the ponies, feels like it's taken right out of the show. Legitimately feels like it's taken right out of the show. So yeah, it feels like it was taken right out of the show. And and again, these are just based on clips and everything people have put online, sites have put online. It looks really good. It's really entertaining. The one thing about the comics that they're doing is they're actually splitting the stories, it looks like, into two stories that are going to all come together later on, or at least 2 chapters in one comic. You have one chapter, one part focusing on Rarity and RC, teaming up against Starscream and the Seekers. And then you have the other part of it focusing on Twilight, working with Bumblebee and Optimus Prime. And then you have the comic end with Chrysalis teaming up with Megatron. And that's the Friendship in Disguise first issue. And again, the artwork looks great. The artwork feels like it's right out of the Friendship is Magic show and how a crossover like this would look like in animation. And heck, I wouldn't be surprised if this does become a success. They decide, hey, let's adapt it into a series, into an animated movie or an animated special. I wouldn't be surprised. So yeah, the crossover's gotten some good reviews. The season 10 comic, like I said, it looks, the first issue, the first episode in it, which like I said is 89, and my friend, even backed me up on that, looks great. I mean, there's even a scene where they're traveling, they're being escorted by this other group of zebras, and one of the zebras is telling Applejack, oh, I thought Zecora told you about this and that, and about our prince and everything. And Applejack's like, whoa, I wasn't, ready to meet a prince. Maybe Twilight should have chose somebody else. And Tempest just chimes in saying, yeah, usually all the prince and princesses I've met in my time, I've turned to stone about once a week. So yeah, it looks like it's off to a good start. And looks like the issues are going to be maybe 3 to 4 parts. I'm not really sure. Or maybe 2 to 4 parts, so that they encompass maybe reading it all together as being the length of an episode. So that's probably understandable. So that seems like a good direction to go with, distributing the episode, the season. I mean, episode 1, episode 2, and I think episode 3 and 4 are all going to basically be the first episode officially. So basically 89, 90, 91, and 92 are going to be episode 1, even though they'll be chronologically looked at as episode 1, 2, and 3, and 4. And then 93, 94, 95, 96, even though they'll be looked at as episode 5, 6, 7, and 8, will be episode 2. That's the way I can see it. But anyway, yeah, I think I know which scene you're talking about, though, but my friend, because there is a scene at the end of the crossover, in the first issue of the crossover, where basically Rarity and RC take Starscream down with a piece of cloth or something like that, fabric or whatever. And it is laughable to see a character like Starscream, who always has this lust for power, wants to be the leader of the Decepticons, getting taken down by just mere clothing. And that is one thing I will say. That is one thing I will say about this. It seems that we're getting the crossover between Friendship is Magic and Transformers. It's a crossover between Friendship is Magic and the Generation 1, or at least the rebooted Generation 1 version of the Transformers, basically the now War for Cybertron Transformers that are looked at as a reboot, in my opinion, of G1. Well, that too. Sorry about that, my friend. But anyway, but there is one scene, like I said, in the crossover that I thought he was talking about. But yeah, overall, and I know I say that word a lot here, I do apologize, but overall, they look really good, and hopefully I'll be getting my first issue of the crossover today, and maybe by next week I'll start trying to get the first issue of season 10 in my hand as well. Even though I can get it digitally, I'd like to have it physically in my hand. But yeah, overall, well, I use that. Man, I use that line. I use that word a lot. But yeah, in closing, what I'm saying, the comics are getting positive results. People like them, both ends, especially with the crossover, and Can't wait for more. Can't wait for more. Okay, so our sixth and final topic we're going to talk about here, our sixth and final topic we will talk about is debatable romances in animated series that have happened in the past 30 to 40 years that are hinted at, up for interpretation, etc. Okay, so in case you guys missed it, it's here on YouTube. It's also part of my Animated Girl Profiles Confidential playlist. I talked about Jenny from Bucky O'Hare, Jenny the alien cat or whatever from Bucky O'Hare, which is Bucky's first mate on his crew, second in command, if you will. And I talked about her character, and I came up to a moment that even others have talked about, and especially Rob the Wonderful has talked about when he did a review of Bucky O'Hare several years ago. And that was Jenny's smittenness with Willie, who is a 12 to 14-year-old character in the series. In the animated series, he's, according to from what people like Rob has been able to point out, he's looked at as a 12 to 13-year-old boy. Now, depending on the other interpretations of the franchise, whether it's the comics or the game, he could be looked at as older, if not around the same age that Rob speculated. But yeah, here's the thing. This is one of those romances that in the past 30 to 40 years has been hinted at, if not is up for interpretation, because it's one of those kind of romances or ships, if you will, romantic ships that, it's kind of questionable depending on how you look at it. And it's not the only one. There have been many. Throughout the year. Many. I mean, I can't even count how many. Maybe you guys can, but there have been many that have fallen under this debatable romance category in an animated series, depending on the characters. There have been many. I mean, some people look at Sonic X and like, okay, that's nice that you kind of implied, if not left up to interpretation, that Amy and Sonic got together in that version. But it's still debatable to people like, why would you finally do that? I don't get it. Heck, it was even, what was it, issue 207 of the Archie book. They ended with Sally going on a date with Monkey Kong, or a walk with Monkey Kong, Ken Kong as he calls himself, and Sonic taking Amy out on a date, or at least to lunch at Uncle Chuck's chili dog diner. And in the comic basically teases, oh, we're looking at a hint of new romances. And these were up for debate. It's like, well, what are you trying to do? The thing is, when you look at something like Jenny's relationship with Willie in Bucky O'Hare, and you also look at something that even recently has kind of fallen under that same category, that being Spike and Rarity, it's like, you wonder what were people, to quote James Rolfe as the angry video game nerd, you wonder what were they thinking? Why would they do this? Why would they, put these characters into these kind of situations? It doesn't make sense, It doesn't make sense. I mean, I'm sure my friend here online probably can think of some that I'm talking about, but maybe I'm not saying he can, and because maybe he can't remember or can't recall that many, and I say that with all due respect, because I can't even think of that many except for the ones that come to mind. But it makes you wonder. You know, It makes you, like I said, it makes you wonder, why they came up with a decision like that, right? And here's the thing that I look at. I was thinking about this yesterday and thinking about this even during work, believe it or not, trying to think about, okay, why is it always up for debate? Why are people talking about it a lot? And I've always thought to myself that basically things have, I mentioned 30 to 40 years in the topic. And as I put in the tags here for a second on my YouTube page. But anyway, like I said, I kept thinking about why people always had something about this. Why were they always against something like this? And it just it dawned on me that, like I said, 30 things change. A lot of things can change. Um, in Like I said, a lot of things can change in 30 to 40 years. Heck, even what was it, 15 years ago, something like, even for example, what I'm trying to get at is, if you were to look at something like Jenny and no, not just Jenny, but the thing with Spike and Rarity happening 15 years ago, 5 years before the series debuted, no one would bat an eye on it. No one would really bat an eye. They might question it, but they wouldn't bat an eye on it because of the fact that it's basically, long story short, based in the realm of fantasy. It's basically, based in the realm of fantasy. And the same goes for something like Jenny and Willie's very close friendship / romantic relationship, depending on how you look at it, in Bucky O'Hare. It's fantasy. You don't have to take it seriously. And if you want to get technical about it, you want to look at the behind the scenes stuff about it. Basically, in a world, like I said in my 75th edition of in my Anime Girl Profile episode on Jenny, basically someone like Willie could be looked at as being heroic and brave, depending on what he says about himself. And believe me, he's very boastful. There's no doubt about it. He's very boastful about how he is. Well, obviously he is when he first gets introduced to them. But like I said, he's very, very boastful about who he is and or where he comes from and stuff. And it's just one of those situations that, nowadays, because we're in such a PC, SJW, Karen-like environment, that basically things like this are not allowed anymore, or whether allowed because it's fantasy, it's in make-believe and all that, but it's looked down upon in very controversial ways, because it won't be the fans that get the backlash. It'll be the people that came up with the idea of, hey, came up with the idea that will get the backlash. That will get, people in the faces of, hey, why did you come up with this decision? Why did you do this? Why did you do that? And, they have to find a way to work around it. They have to find a way to avoid that backlash. And it's it, and here's the thing. A lot of people, when it comes to something like this, that will look at them and say, "Hey, what's the big deal? What's your problem with it? It's fantasy. It's make believe. These characters aren't real. So something like this between Jenny and Willie and Bucky O'Hare, that's fine because it's fantasy. It's not real. Something like Spike and Rarity and people supporting it, that's fine. It's cool because it's not real. It's fantasy. It's just one of those situations that, you look at it and you look at something like that and you wonder, you know, why do people react the way they do? I mean, as I was saying earlier, 15 years ago, something like Spike and Rarity, 5 years before the series originally debuted, Spike and Rarity's relationship wouldn't have been looked at in such a controversial way because the world, the media, and all that wasn't as PC as it is now. It wasn't PC. It wasn't influenced. PC wasn't PCly. How do I put it? Wasn't so PC influenced by parental groups, SJWs, Karens, whatever you want to call them. It wasn't, or whatever groups are like that out there. It wasn't so influenced. It was more, even 15 years ago, it was a little bit more free to do what they wanted. I mean, when you look at Bucky O'Hare, the series came out in what, 1990, 1993? That's like what? That's like, 17, not 17, but 27 years ago? Just looked at it, 27 years ago. Basically something like that. When hold on for a second. I'm trying to think what I was going to say. Oh yeah, but basically something like that. 27 years ago, it may have been looked at as being questionable, but it wouldn't be, pushed back on so much. You wouldn't have fans, looking down upon it like, yeah, this ain't right, because they know it's fantasy. What's funny is Disney teased something with gummy bears with Sunny and Gusto. They wanted to tease something there. Like I said, sorry about that. I was trying to think of what I was going to say. But like I said, they wanted to tease something there. And they couldn't really get away with anything until they came up with a certain episode that even just temporarily allowed them to do it. And that was it. That was it. It allowed them to do it. But, they, but even after that, they didn't follow through on anything. They just teased it. And nobody batted an eye. Nobody batted an eye. Point is, these kind of debatable romances, romantic ships, whatever you want to call them, loves, crushes, over the past 30 to 40 years that have been hinted at, up for interpretation and all that, they're always going to be around. They're always going to be around. And I don't think I don't think we have to worry much about it. I'll put it that way. I don't think we have to worry too much about what happens in these kind of franchises, because there are going to be shows even in the future that do this. And you just got to live with it. There's nothing wrong with it. What they do is they basically add a bit of what's known as heart to the series. They bring an element of heart to the series, which is why, they add things like that in there. Like I said, which is why they add things in there, is to add a bit of heart to the series. And I don't think that's debatable. But again, you look at the past 30 to 40 years, and there are going to be several, if not many, shows, animated series that have done this. And they'll still looked at, and with today's day and age, they'll be still looked at as basically a series that shouldn't have done it. It shouldn't have put that in there. They'll be still looked at as that. But again, the one argument people have to give them is it's fantasy. It's fantasy, and they have to remember that. They have to remember that it's fantasy. It's not real. And I think that's the one thing that they have to keep in mind. Like I said, and here's what's funny. That's what makes these romantic ships, hinted, whatever you want to call them, crushes, whatever you want to call them. That's what makes them so intriguing and loved by the fans, if not supported. Because we know it's make-believe. We know it's fantasy, and it allows us to use our imagination to look at it in any other way possible. It allows us to look at it and interpret it and imply it any way we want. We don't have to look at it as being something that's problematic, because it's fantasy. It's not real. So anyway, in closing, when I look at these debatable romances and animated series that have happened in the past 30, 40 years, the ones that are hinted at, up on interpretation, stuff like that. Again, we just have to remember that they are fantasy. They're not real. And that's why it makes them so fun, because you can make any interpretation, any implication that you want. Even if the show doesn't fully embrace what's happening themselves, or fully make something official, and they leave it up to the fans, that's cool too. And that's what makes it fun. So anyway, though, that's really all I'm going to say on that. Let me know what you guys think down below in the comment section. Let me know what you guys think in the live chat, if you will. But that's all I'm going to say, though, guys, for this TGIF Topics on My Mind edition for the 14th of August, 2020. Thank you all for joining me in the live chat, those that did, and those that commented in the live chat. Thank you all for joining me post live stream and watching this later on, and commenting down below and giving me your thoughts on what I had to say, as well as the fact that this also later on will be uploaded onto my podcast, BW Rose's Discussions, in audio format, which I am, believe it or not, two podcasts away from my 100th. Once this goes up, this will be the 99th podcast. And then later on will be the 100th podcast. So be on the lookout for those. And check me out at your various favorite services for podcasts to listen to podcasts at. Whether it's Spotify, iHeartRadio, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, if you will, Google Podcasts, Stitcher. You'll be able to find me under BW Rose's discussions there. So, again, thank you all for joining me this morning. Hope you have a good Friday. Stay cool if you're here in California because it will be hot. And I am out. God bless. Take care.